This video is proudly brought to you by my lifelong sponsor, coffee. So grab yourself a double espresso of your favorite triple or single origin or a cup of your home brand fair trade ground coffee and on to today's video. If you'd told me in 2025 Bleach would be one of the most talked about animes with every over-the-top streamer and groper-mouth YouTuber reacting to every Getsuga Tenshu, then I would call you a liar. But thanks to the 1000-Year Blood War adaptation drawing in an entire new generation, Bleach is more popular than ever. Which is great for old school fans such as myself. Not only do we get to see communities grow, but with increased interest equaling more revenue, and more revenue equaling more opportunities for video game adaptations, it's a damn good time to be a Bleach fan. Now, without sounding like an absolutely pretentious tosser, I was watching Bleach long before your average fan was debating Aizen's Bunkai on r/Bleach. I mean, I even used to have a hollow Ichigo mask that I would casually wear while gaming into the wee hours. I almost went as far to get an Arrancar tattoo, namely a giant black circle in the middle of my chest. I must admit though, I've been returning to this idea more and more lately. The point is, Bleach has always been with me. So the announcement of Bleach Rebirth of Souls, or Bros as I'll be calling it for the remainder of this video, well, it had my inner otaku giddy with delight. The last Bleach console release to make its way to Australia was over 14 years ago on September 22nd, 2011. That was Bleach Soul Ignition / Resurrection for those playing at home, and no, Brave Souls doesn't count, and yes, the 14-year gap is almost as long as the wait we've all endured for the arc that shall not be named. Now, while Bros is certainly not a perfect fighting game, it honestly doesn't need to be. Its true strength lies in its purpose, to serve as a love letter to Bleach fans old and new. Bros is just one of those games you want to sink into your lounge and play for a few hours at a time, so naturally, I chose to play it on the PS5 with frame rate mode enabled. Regarding any other settings you have to play around with, unfortunately that's really about it, aside from the usual suspects like subtitles and brightness. This is something we're going to go into just a little bit later on. Longtime fans will have a blast playing through the decent serving of modes with a bloody damn good roster of characters, including Hokyo-Q infused Aizen, the recently added Unohana, and even true Shikai Ichigo complete with Horn of Salvation Bunkai. The hardest part of this review was actually figuring out how to structure this script. So I thought I'd just list the negatives, the positives, and those critiques that fall somewhere in between one by one. But before we get started and all that, let's talk about spoilers. Now, I'm not going to be discussing the story of Bleach. Bros touches upon the Soul Society, Arrancar, Vizard, and Battle of Karakura Town arcs, so certain characters will appear in my footage that may end up spoiling some major plot developments. So if you plan on watching or are watching Bleach, then I'd recommend just listening to the audio.
Playtime's over.
You're too slow.
Sure, let's see it then. Show me what you've got. Are you scared? Because something that you can't understand is taking place right before your eyes.
With all that out of the way, we're going to start off with our first negative, the 3D models. Look, they're bad. There's no other way around it. They're not awful, but they're pretty bad. Whether you judge it by 2025 standards or the anime adaptation angle, the stiffness and the awkwardness is undoubtedly a distraction. It's less notable during combat, as the pace and flow of battle does an immaculate job of masking the bloatedness of the character models. But during the cutscenes, that's an entirely different story. The soft rigidness of the character models suddenly becomes more painfully apparent, shattering the otherwise polished illusion. It's actually quite jarring, with characters' jaws stretching just a tad too far while they're talking, like a snake ready to devour its prey. Now, while Bros undeniably excels in the action department, its quieter moments are well and truly a step behind. Admittedly, this is something that affects all JRPGs, but just because it's the norm doesn't mean we should avoid pointing it out. Since we're touching on combat, I really should highlight the voice acting, which brings us to positive number 1. To put it simply, the voice acting is fucking brilliant. It's such a treat to hear the cast of the original anime reprising their iconic roles. It made those cutscenes just a little bit more bearable and really took me back to my first time watching Bleach. There was one small change made, which was incredibly welcome, and it helped bridge the gap between the dubbed and subbed crowd. And that's the way Ichigo pronounces bunkai. The dubbed now matches the subbed, with a pause between the bun and the kai. It adds that extra punch that was always missing from the original dubbed run. With that, on to our first foray into the grey zone. A critique not quite good, and certainly not bad, but somewhere in between. I'm going to kick this category off with the lip syncing. It's meh at best. Oftentimes entire limes would be out of whack. Now for me, it's actually not quite a big deal. I can often overlook these small developmental difficulties, having spent a lot of time in the JRPG space. It's something that you grow fairly familiar with. But I bring this up because for many people, it might be a massive deal breaker, especially when paired with how last gen the cutscenes are edited. Negative number 2, the sheer amount of fade to blacks during the cutscenes is just absolutely ridiculous. It's honestly remarkable how they managed to squeeze so many unnecessary cuts into just a small amount of time. I can't begin to tell you how frustrating it was for a scene to fade to black and then jump back to life right before the screen dipped to black, often right in the middle of a sentence. Like, what? For the life of me, I don't understand why this was a suitable and agreed upon design choice. It got to the point late into the story where I just skipped cutscenes altogether. And it's a real shame because Bleach has one of the best and well-written narratives of a mainstream anime. And just having so many cuts easily ruined the experience for me. And I've seen the anime before, so I can't imagine how a newcomer would fare. Positive number 2, the roster of characters. Even without the season pass, Bros has a truly impressive roster, and not just that, each character plays exactly how you'd expect them to play. There's some real love and attention put into these characters. And sure, there are some notable missing characters like Ishin and most of the Vizards, although it does make sense why they didn't include Baragon. It's a little disappointing that only Shinji and Hinamori are the only playable Vizards. That said, it was so much fun playing a quick match with each character, from the speed of everyone's favorite waifu Yorichiro to the walking tank of Zaraki, or the responsive attacks of Bunkai Ichigo. If Bros does one thing perfectly, it's bringing to life some of the most iconic characters in all of Japanese pop culture. Speaking of beat, the music is another point for the grey zone. The soundtrack feels like it wants to invoke Persona or Cowboy Bebop, with some jazz funk rock inspired tracks, which had some pretty decent production value, but then it would switch to generic stock rock and then wash it all down with some lo-fi that wouldn't be out of place in Samurai Champloo, which is good for Samurai Champloo, but not when I'm playing Bleach. Ichigo's theme is completely missing, which is an absolute disgrace. 1 out of 10, let's finish it there. However, the songs that kick in when Ichigo transforms into his Horn of Salvation Bunkai, or when he becomes Getsuga, is fucking brilliant. Negative number 3. The controller customization, or complete lack thereof. It's 2025, almost 2026 by the time this video goes out, and we're well into the endgame of the 9th console generation. How is it that we still cannot customize the button mapping or even choose from some preset layouts? As it stands, the only option we have is whether or not the game automatically activates our keycon moves, or we do it ourselves. Movement also suffers from poor controls, and with that slight delay between pressing the button and the action being performed on screen, any frustration I experienced during my time with Bros can be laid at the feet of the default controller layout. Luckily, we can wash all that down with positive number 3, the combat. Combat is fluid, fast-paced, and above all else, fun as fuck. The combat revolves around reducing your opponent's Kaku points down to 0, with most characters having 6 to 9 Kaku points. To remove Kaku points, now I've said Kaku too much and I'm thinking of Kaka, you need to whittle your opponent's reishi down to the red zone and unleash a Keycon move, Bro's version of an ultimate ability. Each character will have a light and heavy attack, a special tied to the circle button, Getsuga Tenshu for Ichigo for example. There are also 2 skills which require energy to use, a counter, Flash Step / Shunto which use an entirely different gauge, then the Keycon ultimate. There's also a reverse mode where your damage is increased and your Keycon ability can take off double the amount of Kaku points. One of the lovely little touches are the Keycon animations. They can actually change depending on how deep you're into battle, thanks to the overdrive gauge just below your reishi bar. As you continue the fight, your bar will go into different stages, sometimes altering the animation of the Keycon move or changing it entirely. Throw into the mix character awaken abilities such as Ashikai, Bankai, and Resurrection, with characters like Aizen having several transformations thanks to the Hokyoku. Just another fantastic little touch. This is never more true than when we talk about Ichigo. Depending on how the fights are going and if you're playing in his Bankai state, White Zangetsu might take over, or if you happen to die when your pressure gauge is at its maximum, you'll be resurrected as Vasto Lorde Ichigo, or take Dangai Ichigo. This form doesn't come with a Keycon move per se, as your ultimates don't do any damage, but perform a Keycon move 3 times and on the 3rd attempt, Ichigo will become Getsuga and use Mugetsu, giving you an instant win. This perfectly matches the anime scene by scene, and is just one of many finer details that Bros has for longtime fans to discover. If it seems like I'm spending a little bit more time fawning over the fan service moments that populate the combat loop, then it's because I really believe this needs to be highlighted. These small little touches, which largely go unnoticed by the casual gamer, will be remembered by your core audience, who will happily invest into future games. This is doubly so for anime IPs, who more often than not fall short of the mark. Now there certainly are exceptions, like Dragon Ball Z for example, but for the most part it's just slop after slop after slop. Combat does have a balancing issue, mind you. Fast attacking characters always seem to have an advantage. Ichigo always felt the best to play because you could quite easily overwhelm your opponent with a barrage of attacks. And if that doesn't work, you can just spam Getsuga Tenshu to keep a strong enemy far away and whittle down its health bar, like I did with my first fight against Grimjaw, which took 7 attempts, until I finally decided to use Getsuga Tenshu for the entire fight. Range characters though suffer quite a bit. Uryu feels off and very cumbersome to play, like he's moving through molasses, not at all how the character is portrayed. Yet, when I was playing as Renji and activated his Bankai, suddenly the camera pulls away and Zabimaru was looming over the battlefield. Movement felt slow and lagging, which felt right, because it made sense that we would act this way because there's a giant skeleton snake swaying overhead. But when Uryu should be able to dart around the arena and yet feels slower to control than Renji, something is seriously off. Throughout the main campaign there are story moments to complete, where you'll be asked to perform an action that matched the anime. Complete these and you'll be rewarded with keys that can unlock unique side content that gives a new perspective on what characters are up to when we were busy following someone else. A nice touch to be sure, but some were fucking difficult to execute. Quite often I would just ignore them entirely. The worst was the battle between Urahara and Yami. Seriously, I tried at least a dozen times to pull off the required story moments, but performing a counter was a real pain in the ass, since it requires pinpoint timing in a game where controls always feel a microsecond off. Negative number 4, character customization. Now you might be asking yourself, hold on, how can you talk about character builds in a game with lore-established characters? And I'm glad you asked. Going into combat, you can equip 3 talismans that provide a wide variety of buffs, which you can lose if you die, something I found infuriating for reasons I'll get into in just a sec. You can also equip 4 different colored gems, which are associated with unique stat groups: offensive, defensive, combat-related passives, and stat boosting. The problem is twofold. Firstly, there are just way too many choices to choose from, with so many options being redundant, with gems doing 3% of this or 2% more of that. Now these stats do increase as you upgrade them, but bringing us to the second problem is the economy. The cost to upgrade requires silver and matching color gem shards, something you're rewarded so little of, twinned with the ridiculous amount you need to upgrade these gems. Laughably, there's no reset option. So if you're like me and come across a new gem with better stats or something you want to try out, well, you better enjoy grinding away. In the end, I stopped engaging with this system altogether. Even though I could purchase some gems with better stats, the grind was just not worth it for me. Maybe it would be worth it if I spent a little bit more time in online play, but this just wasn't something I was capable of achieving. Other customization options include plate cards, banners, stickers, and titles.
fighting now.
Bros isn't a fighting game that's likely to ever compete with the titans in the genre, but as I said in the preamble, Bros is first and foremost a love letter to Bleach fans, and because of this, all of its shortcomings are completely forgiven when it does such a great job allowing the player to experience some of the series' most iconic moments, with set piece after set piece proving to be an authentic recreation. In those moments when you're fully engaged in the combat loop, playing as or against your favorite character, Bros truly had its claws sunk in. From a purely fan perspective, the game's strong combat framework and dedication to recreating the anime make a fantastic and memorable experience. But I firmly believe that if you're not a Bleach fan, but a fighting game enthusiast, then I really struggle to recommend this to you. The combat mechanics lack the fine tuning you'll find in most other fighting games, the cutscenes are jarring, and the customization options are simultaneously under and overwhelming. But these flaws are not a failure of design, but rather they are a byproduct of the game's singular purpose. At its core, Bleach Rebirth of Souls is not trying to compete with the likes of Dragon Ball FighterZ or Guilty Gear. Instead, its true design pillar is to be an authentic love letter to a long dormant fanbase newly invigorated. It's a game for those of us who grew up with the anime or those who have recently fallen in love with it, who want nothing more than to relive some of our favorite moments. For us, this game succeeds beautifully. Bleach's resurgence in recent years is great for newcomers and old fans alike, and regardless of which team you subscribe to, we can all agree that after all this time, Bleach fans have some great games to look forward to in the years to come.
You're wide open! I feel the power. This ends here. Take this! I will destroy all your hopes. You can't block me. Here. You might want to dodge this.